Hello. So now to carry on with the activities, I am delighted to introduce Tiago Russo. He is going to present data from his study, Monitoring of Intracranial Compliance in Healthy Subjects. Thank you very much, Tiago, for being here with us, for your time this morning. So now you have the floor. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Eduardo and Brain for Care team and all speakers. It's a great honor to be part of this event, which is to pay tribute to Professor Sérgio Mascarenhas. I'm Tiago Russo, Associate Professor of the Department of Physical Therapy at UFSCar. Let me remind you about Professor Sérgio Mascarenhas. I had the pleasure of meeting him in the Department of Physical Therapy some years ago when he was starting his studies, the clinical studies, with the new technology that he had devised. And I can recall his very nice and affectionate relationship with people. He was talking about the role of being a teacher. And I quote him something that I emphasize. A teacher who has no students better than him or her has failed. A good teacher should encourage students and wish him or her to be better despite his own ego and vanity. So I remember that kind of sentence and consideration, really putting an end to silos, working as part of a team, producing really state-of-the-art knowledge. And this symposium today is very much related to that. We work as part of a team so that we can expand further our area. Well, of course, I would like to share with you who my team is. We've been working for Brain for Care for many years now. I am the coordinator of a lab of neurological physical therapy, which is part of the graduate studies department. Our main lines of interventions and research are related with clinical intervention and post-stroke assessment, but also intracranial compliance. Rafaela, she's part of the program and compliance with compliance model for microgravity using space models. And Flavia, as Professor Giselle has said, I always love to hear her, but we were part of a multi-COVID project together. And Camilla, who is currently developing a work with healthy subject together with Gabriela, who was our first student involved in studying intracranial compliance after stroke. These studies have been carried out at UFSCar, the Federal University of São Carlos, primarily in the Department of Physical Therapy, but we also interrelate with other units such as the University Hospital and others. These projects are financially supported by different funding agencies, as you've seen on the slide. In the area of intracranial compliance, we started studying in 2020, beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. We had some meetings together with the research team of the company, and we prepared to develop some basic information. So how would you define the term intracranial compliance? There had been a number of studies showing different concepts about what intracranial compliance was. Some would emphasize elastance as a synonym of intracranial pressure. So at first, we decided to carry out one first study, which was a review of scope. It was published last year in Frontiers in Neurology, and you have access to that by scanning the QR code. This review mapped the key concepts related with intracranial compliance, describing invasive and non-invasive methods used to assess compliance. We've reviewed scope according to very strict criteria. We relied on the recommendations of Joanna Briggs Institute. We used Prisma to review scope, and the protocol was published in the Research Square because that's exactly, it was not possible to publish protocols in other database, so we published there. We had applied a broad survey about the database with a high level of accuracy. We had selected several articles thanks to a software platform. And as to inclusion criteria, we had animal and human models with no time on age restriction that would include compliance, elastance, attributes, including neurocritical care patients. We just excluded blogs, social media, and journals. We started from 43,000 articles and we funneled that down to 240-ish, and then we went down to around 100 articles. And in the literature, despite we might believe that the literature evidences you will reach a high level of consensus, but yet a great percentage of studies, they would apply compliance concept as a consensus for volume for pressure. Less than 52% of all articles, they would add a clinical interpretation of the real meaning of that. And as to sites, I mean, where that phenomenon maybe reflect, 58% of those articles, they would state intracranial compartment, and others would just state just the brain, or just related to vessels, or to the cerebrospinal area. In addition, if ICP is applied to make references about compliance references, most information, they would be driven from absolute values of intracranial pressure, as the literature would not give much information about wave formats yet. So there was still much more room to be understood and explored. The most common means were CT scan, ultrasound Doppler, MRI, mechanic sensors, such as the band for care, the diameter of the optical nerve sheath, and so on and so forth. After that scope review, we see the importance to validate new non-invasive technologies to monitor intracranial compliance, where clinical applications should be applied for different populations, which is not quite clear in our literature. We still lack of reference values to state if that is within an acceptable margin. We have different technologies with different levels of parameters to be compared to measure sensitivity levels to change ICP
peace and compliance. We still require further studies on cost effectiveness to better understand this type of monitoring. And last but not least, we still require a broader monitoring and more information for the medical and non-medical players. Compliance changes and some other modifications that we might have in the CSF. There is a need to new technologies where we should define reference values, some modifying parameters, red flags for situations that would reflect a normal setting or a situations where we would be able to recover compliance. With that in mind, we want to understand what the pulse wave features would better reflect a normal subjects parameters. We all know about the importance to have a cerebral hemodynamic for a pulse wave that can be measured thanks to this technology. However, therefore, the cardiovascular features, cerebral tissues, all those components are key to better understand wave format. Aging, lifestyle, environmental and genetic factors, they may modify vessels characteristics as well as surrounding tissues, and then modify the way as the wave may be disseminated. We all know that regarding lifestyles, if we follow proper diet, physical exercises, if we do not follow sedentary behaviors, we will have a healthier vessels profiles that will ensure those vessels characteristics and qualities from the endothelium, the matrix responsible to guarantee vessel elasticity, as well as the control of the autonomic system for the vasoconstriction. Conversely, if we expose ourselves to a number of risk factors such as obesity, smoking, alcohol abuse, sedentarism, a number of other conditions take place within the vessels that will end up impairing those pressure waves with the deleterious outcomes. And just a factor like sedentary behavior will lead to reduction of parasympathetic reflex and increase of sympathetic activities. There is also changes in nitric oxide and vasodilation as a consequence of the arterial endothelial function. And there are some changes in the cell matrix, such as the degradation of elastins by metalloproteinases, where ages, they represent an indication of oxidative stress and the further collagen glycation and endothelial dysfunction per se. Clinically speaking, we have consistent published information that the less we exercise, the higher will be our death causes, showing the importance to keep ourselves healthy thanks to a healthier habits, physical activities, not to sit down for too many hours, and so on. Along those lines, we have a study which aims to understand the normality curves in elderly patients. The goal is to characterize the morphology of ICP pulse waves measured by non-invasive methodologies in health, elderly and adult patients. The secondary goals is to compare the morphology of those and the effect of age in the ICP morphology, and also to understand the relationship of blood flow speed as an indication of arterial rigidity. And we hypothesize that the characteristics of wave morphology, pulse wave morphology in the ICP in health subjects will help in defining guidelines that will set references of normality and consistent within this population. An arterial pulse would be related to a regular morphology. We are then developing a transversal study with 150 health volunteers actively, physically active, both genders. And we have divided them in 3 groups: 25 to 45, 46 to 60, and a third group between 60 to 80. Those age ranges, they were defined based on some studies that verified an increase on the arterial rigidity in aortic arches. In the 45 age range, we can perceive a great variation in the artery rigidity, even in health subjects. With that in mind, we decided to divide the subjects within 3 different age ranges, considering not only age as an inclusion criteria, but also health subjects, thanks to physical and lab tests, and not using any controlled medications. As non-inclusion criteria, we exclude patients with idiopathic and intracranial pressure, chronic diseases, and patients with the no risk factors for cardiovascular risks. Cardiovascular diseases, I mean, such as smokers, alcohol abusers, and weight, obesity, body mass index, BMI. And those patients, they were divided according to their eligibility criteria, and also take into account their LGBT. All of that is done in their first assessment day. We take measures and we apply physical criteria assessment. Second day, lab tests, blood exam, triglycerides, total cholesterol, HbA1c, reactive protein C, PCR, and some exclusion factors. Third day, a number of recommendations are done for those people. They have to present themselves fasting 48 hours. For 48 hours, they cannot take any vitamins, no alcoholic drinks, On the third day, we measure systolic and diastolic pulse, a Doppler ultrasound, EEG with MC5 bypass. We place a sensor in the dominant hemisphere of the subject according to the Edinburgh inventory. Our team has carried out a number of studies to better understand the position and the sensor pressure to guarantee the same placement and the same torque to avoid any change in the results. Here we have the study coordinators where they apply during the pandemics all care standards and norms to avoid any contamination with the APIs, respecting a contingency program to avoid any subjects contamination. The maneuver was quite straightforward. We would place the subject lying down on an orthostatic table for 10 minutes in the supine position. And after that, the table would be lifted and the patient would be standing for another 10 minutes. This posture maneuver will lead to intracranial pressure due to the volume detachment that takes place during the dislocation. Also, by measuring cardiac frequency in real time and in sync with the non-invasive sensors, we are able to get information about cardiac frequency variability and to get information about the cardiac control and parasympathetic involvement. Here you can see an example of the patient in the supine position and then standing up in the same orthostatic table that has been registered thanks to lateral video cameras to guarantee a further corrected position for further measurements. And here a software interface of the ultrasound software to show that there is a synchrony for blood flow in the carotids, plus waves of the intracranial pressure. All of that to guarantee our measurements as those major arteries, they will reflect that distance between central nervous system and the periphery. We started our inclusion study with 240, and we have already collected information from 50 of those. 46 to 60 age range, we had assessed 29 so far, and our last age range group, elderly, we had 68 and 6 collected so far. What are our future attempts? To conclude the study and to include now different comorbidities, medications, and to compare it to different assessment methodologies, such as arterial rigidity. We do hope that with that, we'll be able to favor it according to the reference supply of normality to the conducted studies with critical patients. and we hope that our group may collaborate to this fantastic idea that Professor Mascarenhas and his group had given.
Thank you very much, Dr. Russo, for your presentation. I'm sure that your group has been making great contributions to better understand how physical activity and our everyday behavior can help provide better conditions to our health. Maintaining our best physiology. I would like to ask you, Professor Russo, how can we encourage physical activity? Or in other words, what are the improvements of physical activity and appropriate healthy eating can have? Improving vascular elasticity, how can it contribute to better function of our brain in the skull in terms of compliance? So physical activity improves cardiovascular condition, it improves metabolism. How can it also improve brain compliance, leading to better reserve to deal with sudden changes on a daily basis? Thank you very much for your question. What we've been studying in physical activity and exercising is the systemic correlation that exercising has and its interaction with many different tissues and organs. We know that when we frequently exercise, the American Society recommends 150 minutes per week of moderate physical activity and twice a week strengthening exercises, combined with avoiding low-level oxygen consumption activities, such as sitting down for many hours, avoiding sedentary behaviors. When we combine all strategies, the muscles start producing so-called exercin or myosins. They are generated by the blood system. They cross the blood-brain barrier and generate central modifications producing neurotrophins and also new angiogenesis factors such as VEGF. This has been clearly stated. The best type of physical activities are those from moderate to high intensity activities. Understanding what the technology measures, which is related with brain hemodynamics and the periphery, has also an impact. Ventricle ejection fraction, for example, quality of the vessel. So exercising can modulate inflammatory factors and minimizing all the impacts which are inevitably going to come from aging. This is a very interesting characteristic. The main effects are observed when it's done chronically, right? When you just maintain a constant number of physical activity per week. Walking seems to be effective as well. There is a paper at JAMA showing that in walking does have an impact. So it correlates with metabolic and cardiovascular disease as well as cancer. So this is something really important to be considered. Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now we are going to have a 10-minute break. Let's stand up, stretch. Oh, it's going to be a 5-minute break only. So we have 5 minutes for exercising. So stand up, get a grab of water, a glass of water, and be back. Thank you all very much. Thank you.